Father Miguel sat on my own in the dimly lit workplace after a string of new burglaries he had taken to reviewing the pictures from some hidden cameras nightly within the hope of catching any signs and symptoms of the culprit's hours passed with not anything but shadows and flickering lighting then. All of a sudden, a familiar figure seemed Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. He became unaware of the camera watching him, and what he did next will surprise you. 2 weeks in advance, the air buzzed with anticipation, because the parish organized for the advent of Cardinal Luis Antonio. Tagle, news of his go-to had spread quick. Town's humans had been keen to see the person whose popularity for compassion and humility had made him loved far beyond the church households arrived early. They crammed the pews and surrounded the church courtyard. Every person wanted to catch a glimpse of. The prominent visitor, Father Miguel, stood by using the primary front. He adjusted his collar nervously. He had met Cardinal Tagle before, however, by no means on such a critical event. Because the glossy black automobile pulled into the gravel driveway, Miguel stepped forward. His palms had been clammy in spite of the cool breeze. The Cardinal exited and presented his signature warm smile and a slight bow to those collected. "Your Eminence," Miguel greeted and bowed deeply. Tagle's presence regarded to boost the mood right away. Parishioners, who were subdued by means of recent burglaries, now greeted each other with renewed warmth. It turned into as though his arrival on my own had eased their burdens in the church. He moved through the crowd with EE. The Cardinal shook palms, presented advantages, and spoke with true hobby to anybody he met. Father Miguel couldn't assist, however, since awe on the Cardinal's charisma. Notwithstanding his high rank, Tagle carried himself with the humility of an easy servant, but as Miguel observed from the periphery, he observed something bizarre. Clara, the church housekeeper, was normally quiet and reserved. Nowadays, she appeared surprisingly traumatic. She lingered inside the shadows close to the settee with her arms clasped tightly collectively together. Her gaze flickered closer to the Cardinal, as though looking ahead to the proper second. While Tagle ultimately approached, she stepped forward and whispered something to him. Father Miguel noticed the Cardinal nod, barely, however his expression remained unreadable. Then Clara suddenly grew to become and left the room. Her faded face betrayed an emotion Miguel couldn't identify. The moment left an effect. Miguel's stomach churned with unease. It wasn't like Clara to behave so strangely, mainly in front of a person as respected as Cardinal Tagle. He brushed it off his anxiety, however couldn't completely disregard the nagging feeling that there has been greater to the interplay than met the eye. As the night endured, Miguel attempted to consciousness at the events to hand, but his mind saved circling again to Clara's fleeting phrases inside the Cardinal's calm but enigmatic reaction. Something approximately it nodded him. It was nearing nighttime when Father Miguel's smartphone buzzed at the nightstand. He reached for it, groggy. His mind had been scattered through the overdue hour. The caller ID displayed the name of the safety corporation overseeing the lately hooked-up cameras. His heart sank after weeks of uneventful monitoring. A call at this hour could best suggest trouble. Father Miguel, we detected some uncommon pastime on the church premises. The operator stated, you may want to study the photos from digital camera 3 close to the east corridor. Miguel hung up, dressed fast, and made his way to the small office wherein the monitors had been housed. The church became silent. Its lengthy corridors were dark and foreboding under the faint moonlight seeping via stained glass home windows. Sitting inside the glow of the security video display units, Miguel navigated to the photos from earlier in the night. In the beginning, the screen confirmed the familiar sight of empty hallways and locked doors. However, then, because the timestamp rolled beyond 11, a shadowy determinant emerged from the nook of the frame. It was Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. Miguel leaned ahead. His eyes narrowed. The Cardinal moved with reason. He paused on occasion to look over his shoulder and scanned his environment with what may want to simplest be defined as weariness. Miguel's chest tightened. What become the Cardinal doing at this hour? The photos grew greater troubling as Tagle approached Clara's quarters. He paused out of doors. Her door, his hand hovered over the doorknob once more. He glanced down the hallway to make sure he became on my own happy. He entered and disappeared into the room. Miguel iced up his thoughts. Raced the sight of such a reputable, determined, transferring so covertly sent a wave of doubt and confusion crashing over him. His preliminary idea was to give the Cardinal the benefit of the doubt. Really, there was a harmless reason for his movements. However, the secrecy, the glances over his shoulder, the late hour, none of it sat proper with Miguel. He performed the pictures again and scrutinized each detail. The Cardinal's behavior became measured, almost calculated, and the deliberate secrecy only deepened Miguel's unease. What could he be doing in Clara's room? Miguel murmured aloud. He tried to brush aside the darker opportunities creeping into his thoughts. However, they clung stubbornly and refused to be silenced. Half-hour later, Miguel grew to become off the photos and rubbed his temples. He resolved to hold a watch at the situation and collect greater information earlier than taking motion deep down, although a gnawing unease lingered. The Cardinal's moves hinted at something some distance more complex than Miguel may want to yet realize. As he left the workplace, the corridors of the church regarded darker than standard, and the silence pressed down on him like a heavy weight. For now, he would wait and watch. However, Miguel couldn't shake the sensation that his selection to delay would come at a price. He couldn't but foresee the morning solar forged a heat glow at the church, but the ecosystem inside turned into something but vivid. The parishioners Now exchanged furtive glances and hushed whispers phrase of the cardinal's past do night movements had come what may slipped into the congregation's conversations. Miguel assumed it came from the safety employer. I heard he turned into visible close to Clara's quarters. One woman murmured, truly it is not anything. The alternative spoke back, but her tone became unsure. Cardinal Tagle is a person of God. There have to be an explanation, but not all have been so charitable. A man is a man. A gruff voice interjected, clergy or not. Secrecy at that hour increases. Questions. Father Miguel moved through the group. Each comment felt like a stone delivered to the burden already urgent down on his shoulders. He had hoped the incident would remain restricted to the safety footage, but now it becomes slipping into the parish's collective consciousness and threatening to spire into something uncontrollable. Miguel's very own uncertainty only deepened the burden. He could not forget about what he'd seen, but confronting Cardinal Tagle without clear proof felt unthinkable. The cardinal became no longer best a senior clergyman, however a revered discern a fake accusation ought to reason irreparable damage to the church and to Miguel's personal function. As he wrestled together with his thoughts, Miguel's interest turned to Clara. She had usually been quiet, but these days she appeared nearly ghost-like. She avoided eye contact save to herself and declined invitations to join the alternative nuns of their morning prayers. Her shoulders had been hunched and her gaze turned into fixed at the ground, as if she had been sporting a heavy burden of her personal. Miguel watched her from a distance. He stated her growing isolation may want to her conduct be connected to the cardinal's actions or turned into he letting his imagination run wild. Father Miguel sat within the dim glow of the display. Yet again his fingers trembled slightly as he replayed the photos from the previous nights. Each pal body discovered the identical troubling sample. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle leaving his quarters overdue at night, taking walks deliberately through the church corridors and pausing in short earlier than coming into Clara's room. The visits lasted over an hour from time to time, too earlier than the cardinal returned to his very own quarters. One time he even noticed the cardinal beckoning Clara towards him, handiest for her to stoop suspiciously over his lap. Whenever she left, her eyes had been rimmed red. The consistency of the behavior left Miguel shaken. This turned into changed into no isolated incident. Whatever changed into occurring, it changed into intentional and secretive. Miguel's thoughts swirled with conflicting minds. Should there be a benign rationalization? He wanted to trust it. However, the secrecy cast a long shadow of doubt. For hours he sat in silence, weighing his alternatives. To confront Cardinal Tagle turned into to hazard the entirety his role, his popularity, and doubtlessly the recognition of the church itself. But to mention nothing felt similarly wrong. As Miguel deliberated, his cell phone buzzed on the desk. He hesitated earlier than selecting it up, dreading what may come subsequent. The caller ID discovered the safety agency's call. A sinking feeling settled in his chest. Father Miguel, the operator, stated, we have reviewed additional pictures and noticed the ordinary pattern of hobby. Given the circumstances, we feel obligated to inform you that this behavior is tremendously irregular. It can warrant further motion. Miguel thanked the caller and hung up. If even the safety organization had flagged the cardinal's behavior, how much longer may want to he delay? He became back to the monitor and stared on the frozen photo of Tagle. Status out of doors. Clara's door. The cardinal's expression was calm. However, the secrecy of his actions betrayed an unsettling motive. Miguel leaned lower back in his chair, the weight of his unavoidable choice pressed down like an iron shroud. He thought of the parishioners' whispers and the trust they located inside the clergy. He concept of Clara, her withdrawn demeanor hinted at an inner warfare he couldn't but understand, and he notion of the cardboard, a person well known with the aid of such a lot of whose recognition now hung within the stability. As dawn approached, Miguel subsequently stood. His decision became made. He could not ignore what he had visible, but he resolved to technique the cardinal with care and recognize the confrontation might not be easy, but the truth needed to be uncovered. An hour later, Father Miguel stood outdoor Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle's quarters. His coronary heart pounded so loudly he feared it would echo via the quiet hallway. He clutched his rhodill in a single hand. It became a small gesture to steady his nerves. He knocked gently. The door opened almost without delay. Tagle stood before him. The cardinal's face was calm and welcoming. Father Miguel, Tagle stated warmly, what brings you right here at this hour? Miguel swallowed difficult and stepped inside. The room was modest, consistent with the cardinal's humble recognition, but Miguel's gaze failed to linger at the surroundings. His focus turned into absolutely on the man before him. Your Eminence, Miguel stated, there's something I need to cope with you. Although it pains me to accomplish that. Tagle gestured for him to sit. His expression remained serene. Please speak freely. Miguel hesitated and selected his phrases carefully. During the last numerous nights, I've noticed interest on the safety pictures you've got. Been traveling Clara's quarters late at night. The secrecy, the timing, it has raised questions that I cannot ignore. For a moment, Syl crammed the room. The cardinal's face softened rather than anger or defensiveness. Miguel noticed no how in his eyes. The cardinal folded his fingers. Sister Clara has been struggling with extreme despair. She approached me privately in the course of my first day right here looking for steering. He said she feels remoted, pressured via guilt she cannot shake, and crushed through the expectancies placed on her. Miguel's breath stuck as he listened. The photograph of Sister Clara's Pale face her hunched posture, and her avoidance of the opposite nuns replayed in his mind the past due nighttime conferences Tagle persevered had been her request she felt more secure speak me below the cover of darkness far away from prying eyes and questions I agreed to meet her, than now not to. Cover something but to shield her privateness and dignity, she feared how others may understand her struggles. Miguel stared at the cardinal, the weight of his personal assumptions crashed down on him. I recognize your concern, Father Miguel, Tagle said in a tight voice, but every so often our roles call for discretion. My only goal changed into to offer her solace and non-secular suggest relief washed over Miguel. He had doubted the cardinal's integrity and permit his fears, and the whispers of the parishioners cloud his judgment. He diminished his head. I am sorry, your Eminence, he said softly. I allowed doubt to blind me. Tagle located a hand on Miguel's shoulder. We're all human, Father Miguel. Even in our religion, worry can creep in what topics is that we act with humility and are searching for the fact is you have accomplished. As Miguel left the cardinal's quarters, a feel of peace started out to settle over him, but it turned into tempered by using the belief of how, without problems, appearances could deceive. That afternoon, Clara approached Father Miguel within the quiet of the chapel. Thank you, Father, for understanding and keeping my struggles non-public. She whispered. Her phrases carried the weight of relief, and Miguel nodded, humbled via her trust. He resolved to approach destiny challenges with both caution and compassion, knowing mistrust should genuine a heavy toll. Have you ever made an